Well, hello everyone. My name is Justin. So I will be the presenter for today's All About Calculation webinar. So currently I am Think Academy's grade 2 long-term course teacher, and I also teach the basic math courses as well. So I have met more than 100 students already. So our webinar today mainly focus on the calculations. So why do we take calculation so serious? Because calculation are still one of the most important topic in the elementary school level. And actually almost all the knowledges that we learn in elementary school level, no matter if it's geometry or word problems or any other kind of knowledges, it all involves calculation. So to begin with, I want to ask the parents if the following cases actually apply to your child. So over here on the left side, so the kids are doing calculation questions, and what they think about in their head is, so why am I doing calculation? I mean, they are calculators, right? Why are we spending so much time to build up something, no matter if it's speed or accuracy, or something we have already can use some tools to actually solve it? Why do we do that? The second thing, so it's like every time when the kids are doing calculation questions, they are moving around, their mind are going, I don't know where they go. They maybe go to Mars, going to the moon. They are thinking anything other than the calculation questions. And of course, the parents are furious, right? It may take them like the whole night to do one sheet of the calculation problems. And then on the right, we can clearly see that the parents are still very mad. Not sure it's just trying to build a bad image, but especially I'm pretty sure if the parents see that the students, they actually pretty much solve all the process for each steps. However, there's always some times when they are writing down the numbers, they got wrong, they copy down the wrong numbers, or maybe they copy down the wrong sign. Maybe at first it might be 13 plus 2, and then they just changes to 13 minus 2, and you don't know why. All right, the parents have no idea why this happened to your kids. So luckily, if those following cases actually apply to your kid, then you are at the correct webinar. Okay, so this webinar will help you to build the students' calculation skills. No matter how long it is, trust me, it's gonna work. All right, but first of all, I just want to explain how important calculation is. Okay, actually, calculation, among all the knowledges we learn in the elementary school level, calculation is actually the fastest way to build a sense of achievement, especially in the mathematics for the students. Why is that? Because for calculation, there are so many different ways to help students to build up their calculation skills. Well, especially when you can limit the time, you can also limit the questions that student took. And sometimes it only takes 21 days for the students to improve a lot in calculations. However, but why students still cannot, why the students still they still cannot improve? Because they actually takes a lot proper methods. So that's why we are having this webinar, to let the parents know there are ways to improve the students' calculation accuracy and the speed. All right, and then before I talk about the importance of calculations, first of all, I want to ask you guys another question. Okay, so talking about math, what is the first thing that comes through your mind? I'm pretty sure a lot of people's understanding, the number and the math, they are pretty much the same thing. And then, other than the numbers, we have to use some operations, no matter it's plus, minus, multiply, divide. If we combine those things together, then it comes to the calculation. Okay, so actually without calculation, there is barely anything, especially in the elementary school, the students can actually try. And if you look at what we learn from kindergarten all the way to grade 12, you should be surprised at how many calculation topics that we actually cover. And actually, not just because the calculation is important. It's just something that we have to continuously learn. Okay, it's the most fundamental skills, and also it takes some time to actually do good in calculations. So first of all, let's talk about. I actually summarized the characteristics of calculation into 4 parts. But before we do that, I want to use a very, very interesting example to show you the relationship between the rice and calculations. Okay, rice is something that we all know, right? You might not be good at calculation, but you must eat rice, especially for the Asian families. You must eat rice. So what are the 4 characteristics for rice? Okay, the first thing that I have is we eat it. We actually eat it every day, right? So it's not like something that we eat it for a week and then just suddenly we start to eat noodles, we start to eat burritos or something like that. That's something we eat every day. And then other than that, we know that in every single family, in every single household, there is someone that cooks the best rice. Okay, no matter if it's your grandma, your grandpa, or it's your mom or your dad, there is someone that cooks the best rice, and it actually takes some time to build that cooking skills. And then the third thing is, it is hard to identify what is a good rice and what is a bad rice. So for example, if you just start to eat rice, okay, how can you identify, oh, this rice is fresh, it's from this year, and then, oh, the rice I ate yesterday was from 2 years ago. Okay, the quality of the rice is hard to tell. And then the fourth thing is, we always ignore the importance of rice in our daily life. Okay, just because the rice we eat it every day, maybe every meal, then a lot of people forget to appreciate how important rice is in our diet. And then let's talk about calculations. Okay, I said it is super similar, and it is actually true. Again, we still have 4 characteristics. The first characteristic is, it is for calculation, it is a consistent learning period. Okay, so because since we're learning it from kindergarten all the way to grade 12, maybe even in college, so it is a long-term studying journey. So I will actually show you guys the topic just in the elementary school level. And then the second thing about calculation is, the pace that the student improve on calculation is actually relatively slow. In other words, students that are good and bad in calculations, I mean, they may not result in a huge difference. So for example, let's say if the students actually know how to solve 1 plus 1 when he is 3 years old, compared to when he starts to learn 1 plus 1 in let's say 1st grade, it might not be a huge difference as long as they know how to do it. However, if you want to improve from bad at calculation to being excellent, it will be much more difficult. Okay, it's not going to be like I'm here talking to you and then suddenly you know how to do calculations. And then the third thing is, the threshold of calculation is very low. So the calculation we have been emphasizing that from kindergarten all the way to middle school is just one module in our education system. So it's not like something that we teach outside of students' daily schoolwork. So, and sometimes the calculation is not that hard. So the threshold is super low, which means that everyone has to learn it and everybody has to know it. And finally, just because the first 3 characteristics, it will lead to one thing. It's like parents always ignore the importance of calculation. Why? It's just because calculation is a continuous learning process. The parents might think, oh, so, well, I have a problem here. My students actually are not doing very good on calculation in 1st grade. But I don't think it matters. Maybe after we continue learn in the 2nd grade, I mean, it will slowly improve. And we can just take it slowly, and we don't want to rush the kids. Well, and also because it's a low threshold, parents always ignore its difficulty. Parents feel like everyone is learning this, and it is not that difficult. So maybe we don't have to focus on calculation. The student will eventually figure out a way to do it. So those three characteristics will lead to the last one. The calculation, it is very easy for parents and the students to ignore. Okay, so here is actually the timeline that I prepare for everyone for calculations. So in kindergarten, the students usually start to learn some basic addition and subtraction within the 20s. And then in grade 1, we move on to addition and subtraction, maybe within 100. And then in grade 2, we're getting into another level. The students are start to learning the basic multiplication tables and some basic divisions. And then in grade 3, again, we leveled up and do division with remainders, the long multiplications, and start to learn fractions. Especially in the US education system, we learn fraction a lot earlier than the decimals. And then in grade 4, okay, it's a huge gap. We learn long divisions, the mixed operations, and also the addition and subtraction for the decimals. And then in grade 5 and grade 6, I'm not going to do in much more detail, but again, it's continue to level up. I just want to let the parents know every single semester we are learning new things, and maybe those sometimes it is not even relevant. Okay, and then I'm pretty sure many parents here that are here listening to the webinar knows that how important calculation is. But the parents are still very confused. So I know my students had some issues on calculations, but where exactly is the students have something wrong? Okay, so I want to talk about the students' weakness. Okay, so previously we talked about the importance of calculations and the characteristics of calculation. So if your kids, okay, if you want to summarize what happens to your kids' calculation and just use one word, what is the word you guys are going to choose? So I actually think about 3, and since I have talked to and communicate with a lot of parents, I heard those 3 words most often. The first thing is sloppy. All right. The second thing is careless, and then the third thing is unwary. But those 3 things are actually having the same meaning, which just being careless. Okay. But the thing is careless really the best word to describe the errors the students actually made? Actually, based on my opinion, I think it is more like an explanation, or let's say an excuse given by the parents and also given by the students when they cannot find the problems. What does that mean? So for example, the parents may be very nervous when the student like copy down the wrong number, copy down the wrong sign, but the parents literally don't know like why they copy the wrong numbers. Like, what should we do? They just use a very abstract term and then call their children sloppy to actually ignore and substitute this problem. And in fact, the importance of the problem, or the essence of the problem, actually it has not been found. So based on my personal view, sloppy is made up with those following words. Okay, those 3 words. Okay, this question may be sloppy, but in fact it has this own difference. The first problem is called the psychological rejections. The second problem is called the bad habits, and the third problem is called the improper methods. So together, all those 3 words adding up together is called sloppy. So let's actually talk about each of them one by one and explain it. Well, the first thing, what is a psychological rejection or psychological resistance? So ask your kids 3 questions to determine if they have a negative feeling about calculation. The first question is, do you like calculations? The second question is, do you pay attention when you calculate? And then the third question is, do you concentrate on calculations? So those 3 things can actually determine if the students actually resist calculations. So let's break them down and talk about each of them one by one. So first of all, the psychological resistance. So why do everyone find calculation is boring? This is important, right? Because even parents might think that calculation is boring. For example, so when the parents are correcting the students' worksheet, the students have to do it, and then they find it boring as well. But why do people find it boring? Because people actually has a misconception on the calculations. Because calculation is to help the students to summarize the methods. For example, let's say 98 plus 76, okay? So if we add 8 and 6 together, and then we add 9 and 6 together, then actually your brain is actually not functioning, okay? It's like a memorization of your brain, or let's say the muscles. However, if you change the method a little bit, and then do something with tricks, and then we first realize that 98 is super close with 100, then we can actually substitute this 98 into 100 minus 2, and then we add 76. So if we change this method, and if we change the method, then every single question is going to be a fresh start for the students, and it will actually help students to think instead of memorizing it. And then the second question is, why is it so hard to lose focus and concentration? So please be sure to abandon the concept that the students are inattentive, okay? They are born this way, they just cannot focus on calculations. But why can students focus and pay attention to other things? Okay? They can watch the cartoons, watch the TV for the whole afternoon. They can also play outside for a whole afternoon. And they can just play games and actually ignore everything that the parents say. Okay? When the kids are doing this, why no one worries that the students never lose focus? So the deeper issue about losing focus is actually the psychological rejection, or let's say the resist towards the calculation. And then third, the third question is, why children tend to not pay attention to the calculations? Well, a lot of parents actually tell me that we have given some rewards and we have given some punishment every time, but they still don't pay attention at all. So the reason is nothing more than 2 points. The first point is he doesn't understand the meaning. He doesn't understand the meaning of calculations. Okay? And in other words, he just thinks that calculation is just a simple tool, just like we can recognize words. And the second point is that he felt calculation is very simple. And he doesn't feel that this thing will help them in the long term in the mathematical studies. And those 2 points are actually to change. We need to change those 2 points on a children's view on the calculations. So many children don't pay attention to calculation because the parents don't pay attention to them as well. So parents think that, oh, the methods are more important than the calculations. And if they know the methods, eventually the fluency, or let's say the accuracy, will finally catch up. Well, the last thing I want to talk about is, will large number of repeated exercise good for the students? Through the description that I have talked about for the first 3 questions, well, you should know that we don't need large number of repeated exercise. Okay, because what we need is to practice very, very, very efficient, but not with repeated practices. Okay, so for example, if we just give students, let's say 5 questions, how did the students do on those 5 questions? Did they actually got everything correct? Even if they got it wrong, now do they know how to do it? Okay, well, he actually improved for the next time and get it correct. So those are the things that are working better, other than give the students, let's say 100, 200 calculation questions continually every day. Okay, it will just make it worse and make the students hate calculations. Right? So, and then I want to talk about is the bad habits. Okay, again, we need to ask students 3 questions. First thing is, how clear do you write? The second thing is, do you follow the standard format? Third thing is, do you use scratch papers? Right? And when you're asking about using the scratch papers, does he not use it, the scratch papers? Do you use a separate sheet of scratch papers, or you are just scratching it on the notebooks or on the worksheet? It actually makes a difference. So I want to give you guys some examples. Okay, so on the left is the same questions that were conducted by two different students. As we can see on the top, it is the handwriting is not very good, right? I mean, on the bottom, the handwriting is still not perfect. However, when you see the one on the bottom, you can clearly see that it looks very neat. Okay, we don't need the students to write some very pretty letters and very pretty numbers. From a teacher's point of view, all I need from my student is to actually write it clear. It is more important than write it pretty. Okay, as long as you can write it clear, the teacher can actually feel how you solve these questions and also your result. And for every single steps, we know how to do it. But for the one on the top, there is no way for us to tell what is the student's thinking process. But at least the one on the top is better than just writing a simple answer. Okay, actually from a teacher, we highly don't encourage the students to just write the answer, because there is no way to trace back the thinking process at all. And then let's take a look at the ones on the right. Well, so actually the one on the top and the right, they both get the same answer. However, which one do you prefer to view? The one on the top or on the right? They both are doing the same calculations, and they both work really hard to do this. However, if you look at the one on the bottom right, you can clearly feel that how hardworking and how important he feels when he is doing the question. Everything is lining up perfect. All the calculations are very clear. And you just feel like the students pay more attention to those calculations. And I have another thing to share is called, actually, it is very hard to change a habit than to develop a habit. I'm not sure if you guys can follow this, because as a teacher or as a parent, every time when we see the students, handwriting is not perfect, we always want them to actually rewrite it and try to improve. But the thing is that going to be better if they rewrite it? Well, definitely not, because he is very used to the way that he write down those words, write down those numbers. And you can tell that they are trying super hard to make it clear, but there's just some places it has been messed up. It's just like the handwriting skills. If we just talk about how pretty your handwriting. I mean, for me personally, I have a very, very ugly handwritings. And no matter how many times my parents tell me to improve it, I have no idea where to improve, because starting from the beginning, I had a bad habit of writing, and then it is just very, very hard to catch up. So for the students who still are capable of building a habit, start right now. Don't wait until it is too late to change a habit, because build a habit is always easier than changing the habit. All right, and then the next thing I want to share is the third question about improper methods. So the first question is, does the students know the calculation tricks? Second question is, does he understand the logic behind the tricks? Because sometimes people don't understand the principles, they can only copy it, or they just copy it manually and memorize it. But those who understand the principle, once they learn this method, they can use it and apply to so many different places, and they result in a huge difference. Okay? And then the third one is, can he use the tricks fluently? Because this one is important as well. So what is flexible about using calculation trick is, can he think about calculation tricks every single time, as long as it involves this type of calculations? Okay, it actually matters. But in fact, the calculation tricks are just a type of quick calculation for some special numbers. So actually, there may be no ways to calculate and use calculation tricks every single time. For example, let's say 123 multiply 357. Okay, no matter what kind of calculation tricks that you use, I mean, it is still hard to do it, right? Most people will just select to write it vertically to solve those type of questions. So therefore, it is just a type of calculations that is not comprehensive, but is highly targeted in order to speed up and actually to be accurate. And second thing I want to say is the mental calculation does not equal to the vertical calculations. So your smart calculations cannot help your, we call it like the hardcore calculations. Okay, we think vertical calculations are hardcore. And similarly, hardcore calculations, it cannot help you for the smart calculations. Those two are totally separate. And then the third principle is that the smart calculation does not equal to solving smart calculation questions. Okay, this is a little bit hard to understand, but the knowledge of the smart calculation is just part of knowing the knowledge of a problem. And then final thing is, we highly encourage the students to flash of spark. So our accumulated like daily encouragement can actually help the students to understand the smart calculation, and it's more than you expected because it's just more than a calculation problem. So for example, when your kid is doing a word problem and then he suddenly tells you, hey mom, for this step of the problems, I know there's an easier and quicker way to do this. And then you should just encourage them instead of saying, oh, they're just the same. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it as long as you got it correct. Okay? Actually, it matters. So encourage your child and help him to improve and accumulate it a little bit by a little bit. And eventually it will make a difference. And now, other than talking about weaknesses, I'm sure you guys are all here to not hear me complain, but to give you guys a solutions, right? So for all those weaknesses I just mentioned earlier, so let's see what kind of solutions that I can possibly give you guys. Okay, so actually in general, we first need to figure out what is the core thing, what is the core of calculation, or let's say to improve calculation. So the first thing I want to say is the interest. Okay, I'm sure all the parents knows that interest is the best teacher, right? Interest is the best instructor, and it is the beginning of everything. Okay, so he's willing to do the calculation questions if he actually being interested. So for example, when you're playing the piano, let's say at first you are super interested in playing the piano, but then once you have more piano practices, when the song or let's say the music that you learn is getting harder and harder, a lot of people quit, because we see a lot of people quit no matter it's violin or it's piano or any other sports. When it's getting more intense, just a lot of students actually give up. So actually, although the interest is the beginning of calculation, it will not last forever. We still need something else, okay? Which is I want to brought up to you is this chart over here. The interest is just the first step, because not everyone will thinks that learning is fun and is for a lifetime. Okay, they don't think learning is fun forever. And actually, after all, learning is kind of boring. We have to say that sometimes it's very boring and very challenging. So therefore, in some places, we can actually explain it according to this achievement chart, or let's say the flow chart. Because the interest can only introduce the student to learn, but through interest and learning, the children's confidence, it must be cultivated. So the children needs to have the feeling and make them feel superior. Make them feel like when I'm doing this, I'm actually better than other students. Okay, they need to feel a sense of accomplishment. So this is the various things that we can do to assure that the student is indeed doing better than other students, especially compared to the students in their age. So once the interest is getting stronger and stronger, he will be more confident. And then he will be more willing to learn. And once he learns new stuff, he will feel the sense of achievement. So which is a positive circle. Otherwise, many students maybe at first they're happy to learn, but when the parents are not like super demanding and have a lot of encouragement, and then they feel like maybe I'm not as good as other students, and then it might be result in less confidence, which will be a negative spiral. And then to solve the problems, I actually list them out in couple different modules. So it actually requires a specific practical process. So let me give you guys some general information. So the first problem is about attention. I highly suggest the parents to try something called the Schultz grid. Okay, that is something that requires a daily practice, and that's something to specialize in cultivating the children's attentions. And also Sudoku can also achieve the same goal. So the Schultz grid is a 5x5 grid, and the students are required to find each number in the order from 1 to 25. And it actually helps the students to improve the short-term attention. However, it is not particularly helpful for his long-term attention, and also for students who is already, let's say, in the second or the third grade. So this is something we can do very early to build up the span of attention. And however, it's just more practice on this matter is very helpful for the children's attention for sure. And the second thing is the interest issue. Of course, I feel like all the parents needs to set up a reward and punishment mechanism. In other words, we need to encourage more. And the punishment is just a tiny part of the aspect. Only when the students are doing a very lower expected, when their achievement is highly lower than your expectation, then some small punishment, I think it will stimulate the children's interest. And it is mainly about the reward. Okay, so the appropriate praise is not necessary about the material form. So if you do this worksheet, I'm going to buy you a Lego, I'm going to take you to the movies. Okay, nothing like that. Okay, it doesn't have to be very includes a lot of like materialistic stuff. Actually, the spiritual form is even better. So more encouragement, more praise, they are going to make the children become interested in this matter. Because one, the student is relatively young, and second, to help the children to understand, we need to help the students to understand the charming part of mathematics, because math is, in a lot of different aspects, math is super fun, and you can learn a lot of stuff through math. So we can give some very interesting topics, for example, like Make 24, and as I mentioned, Sudoku, and there are so many different materials and resources online to help the students to do the fundamental practices, and at the same time with some fun games. So that's what Think Academy is always trying to achieve, and we are having this group chat that providing like daily calculation challenges with some very fun format. So if you want to join, you can definitely stay until the last part of the webinar, and we'll give you guys the QR code. And then the third thing is about the fundamental calculations, and actually there's no good ways to solve the basic calculation problems, and I always suggest the parents and the children that our ultimate goal of calculation, it is fast and accurate, but the speed and the accuracy, it cannot be improved at the same time. So let me just tell you that it cannot be improved at the same time. In other words, it is impossible for me to be quick and accurate without many practices. So, but this matter is still too difficult for most people. So in general, I always suggest the parents to improve the accuracy first. All right? Don't do too many questions. Maybe one day you can do 10, 20 questions. just make sure the student are accurate on this specific knowledge. And then you can start to time your kids, okay? Give them a timer and see, just for those 20 seconds, just for those 20 questions, how long does it take for Monday? How long it takes him to do it for Tuesday? Just last it for a whole week. You are going to see the rewarding part. You are going to see the students are actually doing it a lot faster than you think, okay? So don't try to build up the speed, all right? Don't have the intention to do that. Once the student actually are very accurate on this matter of questions, the speed will actually improve by itself, okay? And then the next thing I want to talk about is the rules and the methods, okay? And this part is mainly for the kids. So when we're doing calculations, there are several principles we always want the students to remember. First of all, we prefer integers, or we say the round numbers. So no matter what kind of calculation you do, always try to build an integer or a round number. Some things like 10, 20, 50, 100. Okay, that is the first principle. Next, it's the round numbers, as I just mentioned. And then we prefer small numbers. Okay, so every time you have some big numbers, try to separate and split it into smaller pieces. And then it is a lot easier to calculate. And finally is to applying the rules. And there are so many rules when we are doing calculations, and sometimes just find the one that fit this question the most. And then we talk about the order of calculations, okay? And this part I don't want to go into much detail, as the students are not on the same level in general. So just at the same time, when we're having the same order operations, okay, the order is from the left to the right, okay? I think most students knows that. And then when we have a mixed order, for example, when we have a mixed operations, it is always going from the highest order to the lowest order. And we also at Think Academy wants the students to remember a slang, or let's say something. It's like a trick. It's called "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally." Okay, that's something, and each letter actually has a different meaning in the operations. P stands for parenthesis, E stands for exponential and multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. It just directly tells us the order of the calculations. And then it's the writing habit. The writing habit, well, so first of all, the students' daily homework and their handwriting, the note writing, it must be standardized. Okay, this is super important. And if you feel that your kids' handwriting, there are some rooms to improve. Definitely have them to rewrite it. Just as I mentioned, to build a habit is way important and way easier than changing the habit, okay? So the process of forming this habit, at first it will be strict, but don't be nervous, and because a lot of scientific research actually shows that no matter if it's the calculation skills or a habit, it only takes 21 days to form. But the proper methods, it always needs to be used. Okay, so not some very crazy method, but the scientific methods. So let's just summarize what we talk about today. So how to improve the calculation systematically. So the first thing to do is to boost, or let's say increase the interest. So this sentence for children is more for the children who are not interested, because some students already passed this level. So at the same time, what we need to do is to help them to continue to learn math, or let's say calculation, via some interesting questions, instead of just giving and pounding them with more and extensive practice, because it will just make it worse. And then the second thing is to focus on the thinking. In other words, the interest and the thinking, they cannot be separated. So within the scope of thinking, so being able to think clearly is a way to increase the interest. In other words, if he never used his mind to think about a problem, but with just the muscle memories, or let's say the memories, his interest is not going to improve because he is just like a robot and doing the same calculation over and over. And of course, using the brain too much, or let's say beyond his limit, also may not increase the interest. But ask him the proper questions. Okay, such like, how do we form a round number? How can we pair two numbers together? Something that will make them think and actually let them feel the fulfillment and the challenging at the same time. It will increase the interest. And also, we are not saying that kids, they do not like to use their brain. If you just think like using the brain on some things he does not understand, will actually make them to hate it, because the children are it's like a natural thing to quit once they feel unachievable or something like this. But so yeah, and then the third thing is to accumulate the methods. Okay, so while focused on the thinking, we need to accumulate methods. So that is when we are trying to accumulate it, the students actually have their own way of thinking. They have their own system. But at the same time, it's definitely not enough, because a lot of methods has already been summarized by the previous either teachers or let's say some masters. So sometimes in this matter, a proper class or giving the students some hint to think properly is more important. So because some methods that students think might not be accurate in most times. And then again, this is a systematic learning. It's a systematic learning process. So as I mentioned, sometimes it only takes 21 days to actually boost the students' calculation skills. However, you need proper methods. So, and also we need some periodic summaries. So what is periodic summary? So for example, when your students are learning the same thing for a whole week, and then you always need something to exam, or let's say to test, if the student fully acquire this knowledge. And especially for calculation, a very periodic summary or checkup is super important. So that's why for our future activities, we are having this thing called the Thinkculation Cup. So it's very similar to the Math League number sense competitions. So the students will actually try it by themselves. It's just a one separate event, and if the students are doing good, they can get some special rewards. But this activity is not just for students who are very good at calculations, because we can think this event or competition as a periodic summary if once the parents know which part the students are like of, then we can improve on this matter. It's going to be more targeted. No matter if you are always copy down the wrong signs, maybe the speed is not very fast, or he just doesn't know a specific knowledge. As long as we know which part he needs to improve, then we can improve it after the competition with maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. The calculation will eventually goes up. So for this competition, first of all, is every student from kindergarten all the way to grade 3 are welcome to join. And it will take place from May 1st to May 4th. And the students can pick any time or any date throughout the whole day to actually take the exam. And also it will be a online exam. There will be a Zoom meeting room to ensure the students are actually working this by themselves, and there's no help from the parents. So the questions that covering the exam is different from kindergarten all the way to grade 3. In kindergarten, there's only be 60 questions. And then grade 1 will have 80 questions. And then for grade 2 and grade 3, there will be 100 questions. So the students are required to take this exam in 20 minutes. And the exam contains 2 parts. The first part is just the fundamental calculations, and the second part will be the smart calculations, where we say the calculation tricks. So 20 minutes, 100 questions. A really test the students' accuracy and also the time management at the same time. So again, the speed and accuracy is what we are testing, and no matter what is your current level on calculation, we always encourage you to try this event to know which part the student needs to improve. So here is the QR code right here, and once you scan it, it will lead you to a sign-up sheet, and then once you sign up, there's going to be 2 QR codes, which is the group chat that I just mentioned. We are having some daily challenges and daily exercise for the students to work on the interest on the calculations. So finally, I hope everyone to subscribe our YouTube channels, and at the same time, I hope all the students are not going to be worried on your calculations in the future, okay? Because that is something you can actually acquire within, let's say, 21 days or maybe a few months. But eventually, I want calculations to be the best weapon when you are learning math. So that's all for today, guys. My name is Justin. So thank you for joining us in this activity, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.